Yep, I think I'm live. Okay, well, anyway, we'll go and get started. Guys, this is one of our first live streams. We're going to start doing some more of these more consistently. And what I want to do is just basically go over topics that I've been asked over the years, over the past few weeks, or whatever, just to help give you guys more information to help you along your fitness journey. So hopefully you get something out of this. The question that I was asked recently was, how flexible do I need to be? So we're just going to take a second and figure that out. So, how flexible do you need to be? And the answer, as you've probably come to know comes out of every trainer's mouth, is it depends. It really depends on, so what are your goals and what do you want your body to do? So a person who wants to do Olympic weightlifting, they're going to have to be pretty stinking flexible. And the person who wants to do, stuff like ballet or rock climbing or things that are going to put your body into a whole bunch of different situations and positions, you're going to have to be really flexible. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that want to do stuff like, gaming, or they want to, get more into, I don't know, coding or something like that. Or endurance sports where you're basically doing the same motion over and over and over again. You don't have to be super flexible, or powerlifting, in order to be able to do those sports. Now, you need a certain degree of flexibility for sure, but relative to stuff like, ballet or gymnastics or things like that, you're not going to need nearly as much. So let's go ahead and talk about basically the spectrum that is going to be required of you in order to get to these spots. So the first one is we got the flexibility stability spectrum. So basically we have flexibility and inflexibility. So that's basically one line of this spectrum. And you want to think about it like, obviously flexibility is, your range of motion. How big a range of motion can I put myself through? And then inflexibility is obviously stuff like, can you touch your toes? So that's one spectrum. But the other part of that spectrum is stability and instability. So if you're super flexible and you can tie your arms and your limbs around your person in knots and then still have a little bit of room to kick yourself in the butt and slap yourself in the face, well, that's all fine and dandy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that joint is strong enough to be able to do, any kind of weighted activity, whether that's like gymnastics and you're trying to do like a handstand, or whether it's like weightlifting and you're trying to put some heavy weight above your head. Or if you're trying to, pick your kids up and play them in the park and like, pick them up and hang them, let them hang from tree limbs and stuff like that and let them swing off and, all that stuff. Like if you don't have the stability to actually get to those positions, then you're going to end up with an injury. Funny story, I have a friend who, very loose shoulder, he went up to serve a volleyball. So nothing super crazy. Went up to serve a volleyball, threw it up in the air, smacked the ball, shoulder popped out of place. So that's a really good example of a dude who is very flexible and not very stable in that position. Now, there were some other underlying issues that were happening, but you get the idea. So we want to be flexible and stable. So let me go to this graph that I made you guys because I decided to get real fancy with you. So this is basically the spectrum that we're talking about. I hope you can see most of that. If not, I apologize. Maybe I'll put it on our Instagram later or something. But you can kind of see here that we want to be stable and flexible. So up in that top right corner, right up in there, we want to be, this is like your Olympic weightlifters and your gymnasts and stuff. So they have to be very, very flexible, but also very, very stable in all the ranges of motion that they got to get to. Now, over here on the other end of the section, you have basically your sedentary folks, right? They don't need to be very flexible and they don't need to be very stable because nothing is really required of them. I also all the blue stuff is basically athletes and stuff like that. And all the things in red are more of like inanimate objects. Like over here, right over there, we got the pool noodle. So that is flexible but very unstable. And over here, we got dry pasta. So that's pretty stable, not very strong, but it's pretty stable, and then it's very inflexible, right? You bend it a little bit, and it just goes all to crap. And then over here at the top, we got an I-beam, right? Obviously, if you've ever been at the top of a a skyscraper, you know that there's a little bit of flexibility there. Otherwise, you know, in the Midwest, we wouldn't have skyscrapers because they'd all get blown down. So, but they're extremely strong. So they do bend a little bit, but not nearly as much as, say, bamboo. So bamboo is relatively stable and it's also pretty flexible. So you have this whole range of different, you know, levels of stability and instability and all that good stuff. So the question is, where do you fall on this spectrum? And I've just went over like general, there's obviously outliers. Like I put endurance athletes right over here. And, you know, that's because most of the time they're doing the same motion over and over again. So you're probably not going to need a whole lot of flexibility. Same thing with a power lifter, right? They need a certain amount of flexibility in order to get to, you know, their lifts, like a squat and a deadlift and things like that. And bench press, obviously you need a certain degree of flexibility. And there are certainly some that are more flexible than others. But generally speaking, this is the trend that we're looking at as far as these different sports and things like that. So again, the question is, where are you? And in order to figure out where you need to be, you got to figure out where you're currently at. And so I gave you guys a few examples over here of different, you know, you can get crazy with all your screens and all your litmus tests as far as what you're, where you need to be and all that stuff. But basically, I got these over here. We got the world's greatest stretch, an overhead squat, a handstand, and then like a single leg squat or a pistol squat. So those are just general litmus tests or screens. I mean, you can get as specific as like a Faber test or a Thomas test that a physical therapist might take you through to figure out like your hip flexor or thoracic spine range of motion, or you can get super general. I mean, general litmus test could be, hey, can you get down into the bottom of your squat? And therein is your test, right? Can I get down to the bottom of my squat with a flat foot? Is my hip crease below my knees? Are my knees facing off to the side? Is my spine nice and straight? And if you don't meet any or all of those requirements, then hey, congratulations. You just figured out that, all right, well, my feet were flat, but my hips were well above my hip crease and my back was hunching over like a hunchback. Okay, that's not bad information. That's great because now we know what we need to fix. We need to fix our spine, get that straight. We need to increase our hip mobility and get down there into the bottom of that squat a little bit lower and figure out where we need to be. So that is what we need to do in order to figure out where we need to be on that spectrum. And there's really no wrong or right place to be. It's really just dependent on what are your goals. So let's just say, for example, you just want to be able to keep up with your kids and you want to make sure that you can hang out with them and still have fun and do stuff and not have to worry about like your joints being super achy or slipping and falling and hurting yourself or straining a muscle. And in that situation, you're going to want to end up being, let me go back to this over here real quick. So you're going to want to end up being, if that's you, just kind of a stay at home and you just want to get to a point to where you don't have to worry about getting injured, you're going to want to be closer to here. You know what I mean? Over in this quadrant. And you can make a pretty strong argument for everyone should be in that, basically that section or that quadrant of that spectrum, because that's where we're going to end up being the safest. It's where we're going to end up having the most mobility, but also the strongest joints at all of those angles. And ideally, that's really what we want. Where we don't want to be is on that bottom left of that spectrum where you're not very flexible and you're not very stable, because that's just a recipe for disaster. That's like if you're going outside and it's icy on the roads or something, it's starting to get to be winter now. So you go outside and you hit a piece of ice and your leg just shoots right out from underneath you. If you're flexible, you're probably going to fall and you're just going to end up having a good laugh at the end of it. But if you're not flexible and you're not used to being in those ranges of motion and you're definitely not used to carrying any kind of load in that position, boom, now I've got a strain. Now I've got an injury and now I'm not able to, go to that outing that you had planned or hang out with the kids or whatever. Now you've got to shack up and basically repair yourself until it gets better. So it pays to be flexible, but also it pays to be very stable in all those ranges of motion. So that's ultimately what we're going for, stable and flexible. So what I would recommend you guys do is figure out basically, what do you want to do? Do you want to run marathons? Do you want to swim? Do you want to, I don't know, lift weights, be a better rock climber? What do I have on here? Powerlifting. Do you want to run a marathon? Because all of those are going to require different levels of flexibility. So figure out, step one, we're going to go ahead and recap everything that we've talked about. Step one is figure out where you want to be. Where do you want to go? What do you need your body to do for you? Step two is once you figure out your goals and your priorities and where you need to be, then you got to figure out where are you at currently. And you can do, like I said, a whole bunch of different tests and a whole bunch of different screens in order to figure out where you need to go. It just depends on what you're doing. So let's just go, for example, I'm going to be a power lifter and I want to lift as much heavy weight as possible on the deadlift, the bench, and the squat. So some really good litmus tests as far as my mobility are concerned is, can I do a squat? Can I get to the movement standards that are required of me for whatever, league that I'm going to go compete in? So that would be a squat sit. And then as far as my bench press is concerned, you don't need a whole lot of range of motion, but the bar does have to get to your chest, right? So a push-up all the way down to the ground, that's a pretty easy one. And then at the same time as we're doing the push-up, we can assess, all right, are my shoulder blades staying where they need to go? Because that's another, you might have the flexibility to get down there, but do you have the stability around your shoulders to actually be able to maintain those positions and move heavy weight safely? And then for the deadlifts, you could basically do something as easy as reach down to touch your toes. Now, you don't necessarily need to be able to touch your toes to do a successful deadlift, but we have to have some mobility out of our spine. If I can't reach over and basically get my hands down low without my upper back and my back completely arching, that's a dangerous recipe for a deadlift, right? So we got to be able to get down relatively low, stick your bottom back, and make sure that your back is straight so that when you pick up that deadlift, you're just going to end up smashing heavy weights instead of blowing out discs, right? So after you get your step one, you assess your goals and your priorities and figure out what you need. Then step two, you got to figure out where you are. It's just like picking up a road map to go on a road trip. You've got to know where you're starting and where that end point is. Otherwise, you're just going to be wasting time and wasting gas. And then step three is create a stretch routine and do it every single day. And again, it all really boils down to what do you want to be able to end up doing. Hold on a second. If you want to end up basically doing, let's just say, gymnastics and Olympic lifting, if you just want to go full bore, you're going to have to do a lot of stretching and even more so, a lot of stability exercises to make sure that this new range of motion that you've created is supported by muscles that are strong enough to make sure that your joints don't slip out of place, right? Kind of important. And then, like I said, after that stretch routine, after you figured out where you want to be, you create that stretch routine and then you do it every day, as often as you can think about it. Doesn't necessarily have to be like a 30, 45-minute routine, but if you can get and you can find a few stretches that really serve you well and help you create a lot of difference in a short amount of time, those are the ones you want to hang out with. So you get your stretches and then you couple that with activation exercises. Now, here's my shameless plug. We actually have several videos on our channel how to do all that stuff, and we've got stuff over we've got stuff over shoulders, knees, low back, ankle mobility, all that stuff. It's all in there. So if you need some help figuring out where you need to be and where you want to go, feel free to hang out, go check out our channel page and peruse through those videos and find the ones that are going to work for you. Okay. Gang, that is our maiden voyage into the live stream. So I hope you liked it. I hope you got something out of it. Like I said, we're going to be doing more of these. So if you're watching this and you have questions over anything fitness related, please hit us up, let us know, and I'd be more than happy to hop back online and answer it to the best of my abilities. All right? You guys have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.